Welcome to Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. Legal issues simplified through real client stories and real-world experiences. Creating simplicity in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. I'm your host, ByrdAdatto, with my co-host, Michael Byrd. Now, Michael, today we launch season 18.
Brad, our podcast is now eligible to vote.
Oh, and we're in the prime election season, and we definitely do not want to take this podcast down political rabbit hole.
Yes, agree.
We should focus on how in certain parts of Louisiana, our podcast is eligible to drink legally.
I don't think our podcast needs to drink, but it is nice to know that there's a place.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get started. As a business and healthcare law firm, we meet a lot of interesting people and learn their amazing stories. This season, we're entering the most sophisticated season of a business. And Brad, no, it's a little complicated. Sophisticated means fancy.
Oh, thanks.
Okay. Our theme this season is buying and selling a business.
All right. Well, Michael, for those who don't know, buying and selling a business is just one of the several seasons of business. What are the others?
We have the building season, starting a business, the operating season, running a business. We just finished the scaling season, growing a business, and here we are in the buying and selling season.
Yeah, and before we started today's show, you were kind of telling some stories about some Paris Olympics that you wanted to share. I do feel like the Paris Olympics was pretty legendary for a number of these storylines that came out of it.
And don't worry, I'm not going to talk to you about all the cool tennis storylines, but there was many of them. Okay. I read an article about an athlete's level of sacrifice that may be unparalleled in an athlete's quest for an Olympic medal.
Are you talking about the Australian breakdancer who sacrificed her dignity to participate in the Olympics?
No, Brad, though you do have the right country.
Excellent.
And part of me wants to go down this rabbit hole because it's so funny. And the other part of me wants to tread really carefully because I'm afraid that you're going to start demonstrating and no one needs to see you do the kangaroo pose.
I don't know.
Yeah. So, Brad, give some context of what happened with the Australian breakdancer for the audience, the few audience members who did not watch it or did not have social media.
Yeah. And for those who did not see the videos, Ray Gunn, or Rachel Gunn, is a 36-year-old Australian, open quote, close quote, break dancer who competed at the 2024 Paris Olympics. Her performance at the breakdancing competition immediately went viral. Probably not for the way most Olympians do. Gunn, a college professor, or again, Ray Gunn, as known in the street, was not the most talented dancer, but I think she was very creative.
Yeah, I mean, she's not just a college professor. She actually, I guess she studied.
She has a PhD in cultural things.
Yes.
And so breakdancing was something she studied.
Yeah. Okay. Well, my story is about an Australian hockey player.
Okay. There's a lot going with that statement. First, hockey is a winter sport, Michael. Second, it should be, I would be shocked to learn that Australia even plays hockey.
I should have clarified. This is men's field hockey that we're talking about.
I actually knew that was Olympic sport, but I did not follow it. So what happened?
So a player named Matt Dawson broke a finger on his right hand during training just a few weeks before the Olympics, and surgery would have taken months for recovery.
All right. So who hasn't gone? They probably just, my guess is he's taped it up and played through the pain.
Well, apparently the break was so bad that when he got back to the training room and he saw it, he passed out.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So taping it up was not an option.
Okay.
The other part of it was Dawson was 30. So he was thinking his Olympic dream was over. Australia had won the silver medal in the Tokyo Olympics, and Dawson was on that team. So he was ready and thirsting for gold.
Okay. Well, this would be a really weird story if you told me that he did quit because of that. So what did happen?
He had his finger amputated so that he could go back on the field in a matter of days.
Okay. I'm looking at my fingers right now, just hearing about that. Kennedy's off camera shaking her head. Okay. Well, I did not see that happening at all.
Well, apparently the coach didn't even see that
Okay.
happening. Yeah, the coach was interviewed and he was said something along the lines of full credit to Dawson, but he's not sure he would have done it himself had he been in his shoes.
Yeah. Since I didn't watch one field hockey game, much less actually know the outcome of the story of Dawson, I'm now interested in knowing what was the outcome and how did it work out for the 9-finger guy.
Well, I guess it depends on your perspective.
Okay.
He did play in the Olympics.
Okay.
So that part check. Australia failed to win a medal, so
Oh.
uncheck on that part. But I do have a question for you, Brad. Would you have done the same thing for a chance to compete in the Olympics?
Nope. How about you?
Well, that's not a fair question. I mean, these hands are made for typing.
Yeah. Not just any typing, state winning typing, people.
Now you understand.
Yes. Sorry,
Yes.
Michael. Let's jump into today's story before we lose the audience. So let's get going.
Okay. Our client in today's story is a plastic surgeon in Texas with a solo practice. We will call him Dr. Matt.
I'm going to assume, but I'll just say it. Why, Dr. Matt?
This is an ode to Matt Dawson.
Mm-hmm.
I figure he needs a little shout out since he has no gold medal and one less finger.
Yeah. Although not a gold medal, I'm sure Matt will feel a lot better knowing that he was referenced in the highly regarded legal healthcare podcast in America. And believe it or not, I actually know a few Australian fans who listen to this. I'm wondering if they know Matt.
Well, maybe so, Matt. If you're listening to the Legal 1, 2s, 3s with ByrdAdatto, yes, we are talking about you. So Dr. Matt, not to be confused with Matt Dawson, had his own small and stable practice. He provided cosmetic surgical services and had a nurse who helped him with medical spa type services. Dr. Matt did not have a separate med spa. He just kind of ran it all through his small surgical practice.
Yeah, and in the field of cosmetic medicine, when someone's starting off, this is pretty common for a small medical practice to offer, a variety of services on a one roof. This allows these practitioners really to create this diverse atmosphere for the patients, all these cosmetic treatments, but including minimal invasive procedures, which you were kind of describing, and other type of aesthetic treatments.
So, Dr. Matt was living his life, had his own little small business, as busy as could be. And he kept hearing about the wave of private equity acquisitions happening in the plastic surgery world.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny, we're recording this episode in 2024, but in 2020 during COVID really was the first time our phones started ringing where private equity started trying to understand, tell us more about cosmetics, but more importantly, tell us more about plastic surgeons.
Right.
And we started seeing the accelerant happen since 2020. So it's definitely a different world. Someone listening to it right now is like, of course there was private equity, but just a few years ago, it was not. There's none for plastic surgery.
Conversations have changed dramatically in the last several years.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Matt was experiencing some FOMO, or for those who are not streetwise, fear of missing out.
Oh yes.
He was having some FOMO because he had come to understand that his practice was probably too small to garner interest from private equity.
I think Matt, the field hockey guy, was having FOMO too. But Michael, I'll let you explain this time. Why would a practice even be considered too, what would it be for them to be considered too small?
So this may sound a little bit like oversimplification, but essentially, when private equity is looking to buy a practice, they're looking to buy a profit stream.
Okay.
So leftover cash flow after everyone's paid, including reasonable compensation for the doctor, and then they want that profit stream to be diversified. So when you have that source of revenue coming substantially from one person, in this case,
Right.
Dr. Matt, the risk is often too great for them to consider investing. And so just having a little tiny bit for your nurse that's doing some injectables doesn't move the needle enough often to attract that kind of attention.
Yeah, this is starting to feel like an episode from last season where we're focusing on scaling. So was Dr. Matt thinking about scaling?
Great question. Did I say that out loud?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
Just put that in loop, Kennedy. Just
okay.
Anytime he asks.
Yeah. So scaling would definitely be a consideration that you would think of. I mean, that this is where he is. He wants to be attractive. And so, you can scale, build your practice up, diversify your revenues by hiring other surgeons or maybe even other providers. So yeah, it would have been a good potential strategy.
Okay. Based on this word, I've heard you say, quote unquote, potential. I'm guessing that was not the route that Dr. Matt followed.
He did not, Brad. He could not figure out how he would make the time
Oh,
to spend on the business to grow it. And to give you some perspective, because I could feel this when we had the conversation, it was always hard to get a call scheduled with me when he had these questions because he was, just going from meeting to minute meeting, patient to patient all day, every day, super busy. And so actually, running his practice was to just doing the routine things was a task that was really difficult. And so the idea of adding to that, he just couldn't quite get his arms around that.
yeah. At first, when you started talking about getting on calls, I thought it was all your fault. So I'm glad that it's his fault. Is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
no, I mean, that's a big issue for most, either, I can say it for physicians, but a lot of startups is that you're so busy at your craft, in this case, being a surgeon, that you don't have time to even think, you're so caught up in the force itself that you're just, that time suck. There's only, again, last time I checked, 24 hours in a day,
Mm-hmm.
7 days in a week. And
Mm-hmm.
again, unless there's something I'm missing, but generally speaking, that makes it really hard to make that commitment for that physician to do anything but show up and work and keep the business open.
Yeah, I mean, he would even answer, what I don't even have time to go figure out how to find another surgeon, much less all the things that go with it.
Right.
With that, Dr. Matt had a good friend in Nevada who was in similar circumstances. They had done their plastic surgery training together, and we will call her Dr. Reagan.
Excellent reference to our Australian, another Olympic reference. Love it. Actually, 2 Australian Olympians. I like it. So, I guess, where'd you get this name, Michael?
Mostly laziness.
Yes.
We talked about her in the opening,
Yeah.
and she also participated in the Olympics.
Right. So
she might have gotten a participation medal.
she may have. So we don't have a breakdancing plastic surgeon. I really got my hopes up here, though.
No, Brad. Dr. Reagan had a similar practice to Dr. Matt and a similar sense of FOMO
Okay.
on the whole private equity thing. And they were at a medical conference and had an idea.
They wanted to learn how to break dance.
Okay, Brad, enough with the breakdancing.
No more
That's
breakdancing?
nothing to do with the story.
Okay.
They thought they could join their practices together
Oh.
and that this would make them attractive to go to market and sell to private equity.
Michael, I got my hand raised over here. How was this going to work with one practice in Nevada and one in Texas?
Well, isn't that like the most common brand strategy for growing, scaling a business?
Maybe.
Okay. Well, no, they would brand themselves under one practice name and they would unify their website, but essentially they would keep running their practice separately. And they probably understood that there might not have been, a huge brand synergy there with having one single location in Texas and one single location in Nevada. But their theory, Brad, was that now they would be 2, and 2 is more than 1.
Yes.
That's
I
right.
learned
Right.
on Sesame Street. Yeah.
Okay. 2 primary sources of profit production. And this would reduce risk and make them attractive and even obtain a higher valuation with private equity.
Okay.
We at the office have been calling this the Band of Brothers strategy.
Yeah. And for audience members just trying to keep up with this, it's pretty common when you have these groups that are out there that are like, hey, I've got this really good thing and you've got this really good thing. Why don't we find a way to come together to grow that? I know we can talk about, last season we talked about joint venturing. So that's, we've kind of talked a lot about, but this is a little bit different because they're trying to come under one single entity, and it's a little bit different than what you think.
Yeah, and really their whole impetus is to go to market together.
Yeah.
And so, that's the part that, we'll explore a little bit more is, can you just kind of throw 2 things together and go to market? And so why don't we do this, Brad? Why don't we go into commercial And on the other side, explore the issues that go with this band of brothers strategy and learn what happened with Dr. Matt and Dr. Reagan. And no breakdancing.
Many business owners use legal counsel as a last resort rather than as a proactive tool that can further their success. Why? For most, it's the fear of unknown legal costs. ByrdAdatto's Access Plus program makes it possible for you to get the ongoing legal assistance you need for one predictable monthly fee. That gives you unlimited phone and email access to the legal team, so you can receive feedback on legal concerns as they arise. Access Plus, a smarter, simpler way to access legal services. Find out more. Visit ByrdAdatto.com today.
Welcome back to Legal 123 with ByrdAdatto. I'm your host, ByrdAdatto, my co-host, Michael Byrd. Now, Michael, this season, our theme is buying and selling a business. And, in this particular story, there's a lot of things happening. And you referenced this at the end about talking about this kind of a band of brothers strategy where two or more small practices unite to sell on a one bigger umbrella, is their theory. Michael, before we dive into our discussion, does the band of brothers theory or strategy actually work?
Well, generally, no, as a general rule. So there are two major obstacles to this working. So at a high level, private equities will see right through this strategy, and they will often treat them as two separate small practices for purposes of determining value and risk, which go hand in hand.
Well, why do they tend to disregard it? Like, what does private equity see? They're like, no.
Well, that kind of brings us to the second obstacle, which is really the core obstacle, and that's integration or lack thereof. Yeah. So when just to kind of take a step back, when private equities plan when they're acquiring practices
to make money.
Yes, Brad.
Okay,
I'm going to go a little deeper.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. They're trying to acquire them and integrate them together because this gains efficiencies, which, Brad, is another fancy word.
It is.
A fancy word of that is economies of scale. If you really want to, act like you're smart.
You said this was going to be sophisticated at the beginning of the podcast. This has been amazing. I've learned all these big words.
So if in a situation like the Band of Brothers example that we have right now and many others, if you have two practices that essentially are operating independently, other than maybe the branding and a couple of other things, then PE, when they buy them, are still going to be integrating two different practices. There's no prior integration that's happened that would make their job any easier. In theory, if the Band of Brothers strategy included a full level of integration of the practices, it would work.
Yeah, and audience members, Michael keeps using this word integration. I think we need to kind of dive a little bit deeper into that. And integration with two medical practice, two or more, can range from really basic collaboration to full operational unification.
Right.
The closer the practice gets to this full integration, the more streamlined and efficiencies that they will build toward their operations, ultimately, hopefully, obviously benefiting the patient care, the business performance, and in your example, making it sexier to private equity. What I think, Michael, maybe taking a step back, there's both the clinical and there's the business side that when it comes to a good integration, you should kind of focus on.
Okay, well, let's start with kind of give us the top three aspects of clinical integration.
All right. So for a clinical integration, it's all about alignment of medical practices to operate in a cohesive unit, like improving quality care, patient outcomes. So the very first compliant aspect we typically look for is, are they under one tax ID?
Mm-hmm.
Practice operating on a single tax ID can signify higher level integration, where the practice is functioning as, quote, one legal entity. This simplifies billing, compliance, tax reporting, a lot of things that we'll talk about on the operational side.
Yeah. And then, the benefit of this level of integration, it, allows for unified contracting with insurance companies, streamlined financial management, and potentially better reimbursement rates.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's, again, going back to each step. So good job, Michael. So the next piece, just like having one tax ID, we also would like to have one EMR, one electronic medical record system. So that's our next major takeaway. Using this single EMR system allows, again, practices to ensure that all the patient information is being centrally stored, accessible to all same providers. Again, we're talking about streamlining the care coordination. And this integration reduces the duplications of tests, improves communications between the providers, enhances the overall patient experience by creating a more consistent and, again, continuous caring process. And one more thing I want to add to that, Michael, is, again, going back to when private equity comes along, they see one tax ID number, and here's one system we're already utilizing together.
Yeah, and then if you've got a fully integrated practice on, going to your point of the EMR, you're going to have doctors' ability to seamlessly share best practices and talk about things that are not working, and that aligns with part of PE's what they're looking to do with on the clinical integration side of it.
Correct. And Michael just jumped ahead, audience members, because I think he knows where I was about to go, was that allows sharing of best practices, which helps, again, from clinicians, both they can collaborate, they can really share, again, best practices, standardize certain cares and protocols, they can implement evidence-based guidelines. This should all lead to, basically, more importantly, higher standards of care, reduce variabilities in how doctors and providers are treating people. More importantly, improve patient outcome, which I think from a private equity's perspective, or just in general, it also just fosters it develops this culture of continuous improvement, innovations inside this practice, allowing basic duplication in the sense of more and more individuals know how to do the same procedures.
Well, that's a lot more than just putting the same name on the door.
Oh, a little.
Yeah.
Just a little.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Good
under
point.
the Band of Brothers strategy, there was going to be zero clinical integration. So
Right.
it really paints a deep picture of what a full integration
Yeah.
could
That's
look
just
like
the top three you asked.
of clinical,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, well, that begs the question, Brad. Talk to us about business integration.
All right. So, audience, as much as clinical integration is important, so is business integration. So, for business integration focus, we really trying to find a way to unify operational aspects of the practice to maximize efficiencies and obviously reduce costs. Obviously, the more you're doing, the better, in the lower your cost, the better things are for you. The main ones are going to be accounting, marketing, HR, and staffing. So I'll jump kind of into that. A single accounting department can manage all your financial transactions, the budgeting, reporting. So that, again, that centralization helps simplify your financial management. Obviously, hopefully, done correctly, it reduces your overhead costs, ensures some consistency in these financials. And actually, more importantly, starts allowing for more accurate financial forecasting and resource allocations between the different locations.
Okay, I think Kennedy was giving me a signal. Too much Brad.
Oh,
Yeah.
I thought you were saying more.
I was
Brad,
telling her
more
not to
Brad.
make you feel bad.
Oh,
So I was trying to just do it on the down low. But let me talk for a minute.
okay.
Let me jump in on marketing.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
You do love marketing.
I do. A unified marketing strategy promotes both practices under a single brand or line brands. And just pause, going back to our story. I mean, they really weren't going to be doing this. They were kind of going to be under one umbrella, but not really going, at this level. So
Yeah.
you're leveraging the combined resources of having those both practices together for advertising, social media, community outreach, and this integration it does end up actually enhancing brand recognition. It can broaden the market reach and attract a larger patient base. It also allows for more cost-effective marketing campaigns and consistent messaging.
Right. Because if you're pooling your money together, you can obviously enhance the website. You might be able to enhance your social media accounts. So, again, I understand that piece. So, our next is everyone's favorite, human resources, or HR as it's known on the streets. Again, you're trying to centralize, and you'll see a theme, centralizing things. In this case, centralizing the department that manage recruitment, payrolls, benefits, compliance, employer relationships. Again, this is all being done by one organization, but multiple locations. In this case, 2 different practices. This can ensure consistency in policies, which hopefully will help be more consistent on how you work through the labor laws, and hopefully understand more about employee satisfactions. and better benefits, training programs, all the things that you get when you have a back office really focused there. Which sends us to our next aspect, which is probably one of the most important aspects, Michael, is staffing.
Yeah, I mean, the staff can be shared between practices, and believe it or not, even in our crazy example of Texas and Nevada, with the ability to work virtually, there can be, in theory, efficiencies that are gained by that. So with a flexible workforce, um, there's all types of things you can do to gain efficiencies on that front. This allows for you to optimize your staffing levels. It reduces the need for temporary or part-time workers, and can enhance employees' skills because they're exposed to different environments, and so it improves the service coverage and can reduce labor costs.
This feels like a lot different than what you described the Band of Brothers. That's a lot of work, Michael.
It's what if the Band of Brothers did these things, it would have a better name.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair. So, and going back to our story, since we did take a little bit of a detour, what happened to breakdancing Dr. Raygun and Nine Finger Dr. Matt? Did they try and get did they try this, or did they get shut down by the private equity? Like what route did they go?
He learned to break dance with 9 fingers, Brad. It was amazing. No, I'm just kidding. They actually suffered, Brad, from the third and most common obstacle to the band of brothers strategy:
Uh-oh.
distraction.
Ooh.
Yes. Dr. Matt and Dr. Reagan did not end up taking any steps towards integration, even the superficial one that they were talking about, because they couldn't find the time to talk. They'd get excited whenever they did talk, and then they'd get too busy to do anything about it. And so eventually the talks just fizzled.
Yeah, and audience members, physician mergers, although they're more common over the years, and especially with the healthcare practices with mounting pressures, improve efficiencies and reducing costs and higher quality cares or getting reimbursements paid differently. They're complicated. When you're trying to merge two or more medical practices, it can feel overwhelming at times, and especially to the physicians who are they're stretched thin, based on your story even today.
Yep.
And they have so much clinical responsibility already. For a merger really to work, the physicians really needs to, in this case, buy into the process, that their end goal is important and there is a way to get there from alignment. And the second thing I kept thinking about is to have the successful merger, the physician cannot do it alone. They need certain key staff members to be part of that process, which means at some point they need to have some buy-in from their office managers. And finally they'll need to bring just a giant big bag of patients. We have seen these deals. I mean, we had a deal that we got brought into that they had been talking for years before we even showed up. And by the time we showed up, they still took almost 2 years to finally get the thing done because they just weren't focused on it. It wasn't that important to them, but eventually it did get done.
Okay, very good. Well, that's a lot to process. We're getting towards the end, Brad. Do you have some final thoughts for today?
Yeah, I mean, well, physicians mergers there's many benefits to it, right? But it's complicated. It's time consuming, and there's often situations where the attention to the details, the physicians can barely manage their own time, so they just get, as you said, distracted. By recognizing these challenges and bringing external experts into it, bringing your staff into it, formalizing the teams to really take different phase approaches of being like, how to eat a whale one bite at a time kind of concept. The closer you get to that full integration, the greater ease and success you're going to have. And ultimately, this allows physicians to focus on what they do best, hopefully providing excellent patient care, while the operational details of the merger are handled more efficiently. Mike, what are your final thoughts?
Well, Dr. Reagan and Dr. Matt actually could have taken a few lessons from their alter egos.
Uh-oh.
So Reagan and Matt from Australia, they showed commitment.
Oh, they did.
And sacrifice. Now, Reagan might have sacrificed her pride a little bit, but her commitment was that she, even though she didn't know how to break dance, she got out in front of the world and did it. And Dr. Matt, I mean, what more can you say about Nine Finger Matt?
That's right.
So, but they did have that commitment sacrifice. Dr. Reagan and Dr. Matt, on the other hand, were too distracted to zero in and focus on executing on their Band of Brothers strategy.
Well said again, Michael. And Michael, guess what? Next Wednesday, we are back to discuss the importance of learning about who is this group who's buying your practice.
Thanks again for joining us today. And remember, if you like this episode, please subscribe, make sure to give us a 5-star rating, and share with your friends.
You can also sign up for the ByrdAdatto newsletter by going to our website at ByrdAdatto.com.
ByrdAdatto is providing this podcast as a public service. This podcast is for educational purposes only. This podcast does not constitute legal advice, nor does it establish an attorney-client relationship. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by ByrdAdatto. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Please consult with an attorney on your legal issues.